Mr. Hassoun now will share with us a concrete initiative around the green sukuk in sub-Saharan Africa region.
Or elsewhere. Okay, it's working. So the presentation will take technically 8 minutes of your time. So stay with us before the coffee break and the Q&A session. The presentation was supposed to be in French initially, but I was told lately that I should do it in English, which is absolutely fine. To answer Ian and the question Ian asked in his presentation, we know why we should do this. Things are getting wrong with the climate, that's for sure. We know how far. The conversation was about the 93 trillion this could cost. But at this moment in time, we don't know how. And in the mind of many, governments, banks, corporations should issue green bonds. Why is that? There are many other ways to do it. And this is a proposal we make, and we have made to a few stakeholders, which found it quite interesting, to join the Islamic finance ball game with the Green Finance Challenge using these intermediation techniques, not relying on banks technically. So the presentation is named When Green Finance Meets Green Energy on the Green Continent. How can we use Sharia-compliant techniques to boost the green economy in Africa? So, the first starting point is that we understand, talking to energy companies like Mazen and Areva and some others outside Morocco, that energy companies need finance. The second starting point is that these financial resources will help them get more international and at the same time greener. And the third element of intelligence is that these energy companies would like not to use their balance sheets. So using disintermediation techniques. An energy company's business is not to own assets. An energy company's business is to provide kilowatts to consumers. So why not letting us, fund managers, take control over the assets and then pass it on to them in order for them to use them. So our initiative is to build a fund, so a Sharia-compliant green asset fund, with both equity and debt, and make sure these assets are made available to the energy companies. How we do this? By separating the asset company from the operating company. Asset co on the one hand, OpCo on the other hand. So take Mazen, for example, they are just next door. They could have a fund of their own, the equity of which they will be a minority shareholder, and then we would own the assets. The question becomes, how do we fund these assets in a Sharia-compliant way? And that's what we are going to see in a minute. You might say, well, this is very ideal, but how do we do it technically? In the first 2 years, we can resort to banks. We can ask banks to fund the balance sheet of that fund. But going forward, we can refinance the bank loan with green sukuk. And at this moment in time, I'm answering another question of Ian, saying, and a comment from Jeremy, saying, well, the link between the green bond and the underlying asset is sometimes unclear. Well, you have a technique in global finance called securitization. Securitization is extremely powerful in making sure that there is actually a link between the underlying assets and the green bond. Technically here, green sukuk, you are issuing on behalf of the operating company. So let me do this straight to you. No need for many discussions. The better is to provide you with a scheme of how it works. So the Sharia compliant fund is up there, second box, Fonds Islamique d'énergie verte. This fund will be fed with two sorts of fund resources. The first sort is on the top, that is equity. In a fund, you always have an equity tranche. You always have owners. These owners should be institutional investors, which at a certain point in time have in their policies a willingness, a desire to go green. But equity is not enough, because equity is expensive. Therefore, below the fund, you would create a second stage, that is the asset co. The asset co has as an objective, and in fact, it is its sole purpose to own solar panels. So on the asset side of the fund, you would have one asset class, and it's not paper. We are technically talking about solar panels. So the asset company owns the solar panels. How do you fund it? With the equity you have raised from your institutional investors and with debt. Islamic finance doesn't like debt. They like notes. We like notes. So we will issue as leverage green sukuk. Then the comment of Ian is absolutely true. How would you get the AAA? You're not rated AAA. So if you don't have a AAA rating, then borrow it. Ask IDB to supply it. Ask Agence Française de Développement to give it to you. Of course, for a price. This is no free. But the combination of the asset ownership and the AAA rating on the sukuk that are issued by the asset co, not the opco, makes it possible. Now you may ask, well, that's fantastic. Why haven't you done it before? Well, there is a risk. The risk is the tariff. You know how these funds are made, and actually they are actually in existence in the conventional space. They are not in existence yet in the Islamic space. The risk is the tariff. If you don't have a tariff, you cannot price the whole thing. So long as the kilowatt is priced, then you can reverse engineer the whole structure to price the equity and to price the debt. Now, what are the advantages for the various stakeholders into that fund? The first advantage for the energy company is not to use its balance sheet. The underlying contract between the OPCO and the asset co is an ijara. Ijara is lease. You don't own them. You just use them. The second benefit is that for multilateral development agencies or multilateral development banks is to stick to the mandate. What is the mandate? First is development. Remember, this is for Africa, right? Africa has to preserve its carbon advantage. Why and who are we to put dirt into our continent? We're not supposed to do that. So, development, produce green energy, that's number 2. Number 3 is to focus on Africa, and number 4 is the deployment of Sharia compliant solution while placing some disintermediation into the whole ball game. Number 3, the bonds, the green sukuk that are rated would be rated AAA or probably AA, but at the same time we are talking about the first Sharia compliant green bonds in Africa that are rated AAA. People will jump on this. Communication. It's very important that at a point in time, the entire Islamic finance industry takes its responsibility to, at last, be closer to social developments and less to banking. This is a form of unbanking Islamic finance. Well, we talked about this. The equity portion, we made some calculations, and I will make no secret, the calculations have been made for a large European development institution, and the equity piece can bring an investment return of about 15%, which is attractive by itself. The final risk is about the residual value. Who is carrying the residual value? Certainly not the asset company, but certainly not the operation company. So how would you do this? Very simple. You know that these bonds are amortizing. So every year you get the yield on the ijara, the rental payments, plus the amortizing part of it, i.e., at the maturity of the Sukuk bond, the value of the Sukuk will be zero. Therefore, the residual value of the panels are completely evicted. There is a value there, but it's a value that you cannot, at this moment in time, for the 10 next years, make sure you manage to calculate. You can't calculate it at this moment in time. Therefore, the bonds are amortizing to zero. Finally, let's go further in 1 minute. Disintermediation is what we were talking about. You get less reliant on the banks. Let's say it in French, because in English I don't know the term. Déterritorialisation. The fund is not necessarily focusing on one geography. It can focus on many geographies. Third, the Sukuk tranche. At this moment in time, we can think of one tranche of Sukuk with the highest rating possible, AAA. But we can also make sure the tranching of the Sukuk issuance is made. You can think of a senior unsecured, AAA. You can think of a mezzanine bond rated BBB. Or for hedge funds, for example, some of the high-yield investors in the US might be interested in non-investment grade. You could think of a BB rated tranche to be sold to investors in high-yield securities. It's ethical across the board in the sense that we are supporting our own countries in Africa. This COP22 is taking place in an African country. Second, it is Sharia compliant, it's totally ethical, and there is no residual value risk. Finally, if you think of it, let's go further. Why only solar panels? You can think of biomass. You could think of hydroelectric plants. You can think of water. The next green is blue. You could think of hospitals, education, agriculture, you name it, all what we need on our continent. So therefore, think of it. Sovereigns, banks, multilateral development banks are absolutely useful for green bonds and green sukuk. That's no point. But at the same time, you can think of techniques of securitization which make sure that at the end of the day, those who are not AAA could possibly resort to a AAA rating via securitization techniques. But of course, this fund can be managed out of Luxembourg, second largest fund administration market in the world just after the US, but Luxembourg is not an IDB member country. We asked them to become, they said later maybe. But we can do that in Mauritius, we can do that in Casablanca Finance City, we can do that in Dubai or any other place that is comfortable enough for funds to be managed. Thank you very much. That's the technical aspects I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Anwar. Farid, you've recently worked on a substantial Sukuk issue. Are institutions like ICD ready and in a position to implement initiatives like the one Anwar just shared with us?
Thank you very much, I think, the panelists for sharing this insight on the markets and also more recently on the potential instrument. ICD has been rated since 2 years now and actually went to the market to mobilize Sukuk. I think, of course, we are looking at green Sukuk and green bonds markets, and we're working very closely also with other members of the International Development Financing Club, and one of them, of course, is AFD. I would like to say that I don't think that we are ready yet. We are working on that. We are building our assets because the challenge that we have as asset-based finance, we need first to have the bulk of assets. That's why I think Anwar mentioned first that we need to get finance from the banks, and after we have to refinance. The main challenge that we have for Sukuk is that you need to have these assets. And we need also to labelize these assets as green assets. And this is one of the points that was stressed earlier by the panelists, who will give you this accreditation or this certification of these assets. So I think we're working on that. Also, the other challenge we have is about the investor community. Today, the Sukuk investor community is mainly the Middle East and Southeast Asia. I think we have seen some appetite in Europe, but very limited. And my understanding is that there is a huge investor community in the US for the green bonds, in Europe, in Asia and Japan. But this one needs to be familiar with Sukuk as a security. And this is also something that we'd like to discuss with them. We'd like to discuss with a lot of stock exchange to consider Sukuk as another security, because there are some countries that did not classify yet as a security. But what we'd like to say is that we rely a lot on our partners to share their feedback, their knowledge. I think we are working closely now with IFSD. I think they have been the first one to issue this kind of bonds. I think there is also a big fund, which is the Climate Finance Fund, where also there is a lot of accreditation in order to be able to tap that financial resources. I think we'll be very proud to be among the first one to be able to issue Sukuk. And as you know, because you're one of the officers very active on the renewable energy, we are building a lot of asset base in Africa, in Middle East, and also in Asia. I think we are moving green today in terms of assets. I think in the infrastructure, I would like to say that renewable energy maybe accounts for more than 70% of all the assets that we have as of today in the pipeline. And we wish in the short future we'll be able to issue the first green Sukuk.
Thank you, Farid. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to ask a follow-up question to Jeremy. Jeremy, Ian mentioned that potentially we'll need some support to start rechanneling capital from carbon-intensive to carbon-light sectors. Is there a role for the public sector to play in incentivizing investors to purchase these green securities as opposed to the traditional securities? And what kind of incentives would be possible without distorting the market and creating more problems than solutions?
That's a wide question. To be short, yes, there's definitely a role to play especially for development banks, of course, and we've been doing that for quite a long time. I think what's new today is that a lot of development banks are concentrating in the private sector and making sure that the private sector contribution to the climate economy is growing, and we need to be a bit more innovative than what we've done before. I think that the field here, which is the most promising one, is probably guarantees, where the current solutions in the market are not always easy to implement due to local regulation or costly. And I think we need, we as a development bank need to be a bit more innovative than what we've done before.
Ian, what kind of support, outside support, do we need to achieve, what I just...
I think there's a question of... there's many different ways in terms of if the objective, if the public sector or government decides that green bond issuance is part of the solution they see in terms of financing to the transition, so it does have an added value beyond the transparency piece for financing low carbon development in line with their NDC or in line with any of their climate commitments, I think they have a number of different options on the table in terms of supporting that. We've seen suggestions floated that they support and cover the cost, for example, of the actual MRV process, so that the public sector potentially could support the labeling and some of the transparency issues around green bond issuance. There's others that are floating ideas in terms of playing with capital adequacy ratios and other different forms of ratios related to holding green bonds or issuing green bonds within portfolios. That's much more complicated, as that touches on some big pieces of international regulation. So there's a broad number of different support options that exist. Right now, I think there's a lot of ideas out there, but the question, there's very little analysis in terms of understanding what that cost is and whether that cost, by using the green bonds to attempt to finance the transition, is the most effective piece in terms of use of public budget. For example, we had a representative of the French Treasury when we launched our report at the AFD who mentioned that right now there's a lot of ideas out there, but how do we decide that actually use of green bonds? I mean, I think for the type of projects we've discussed here, it makes sense. These projects already would be potentially using the bond market to finance their activities, but would it make more sense, for example, and as the AFD does, to support, use public funds and concessional finance to support credit lines or other financial instruments? And this is something that we'll be discussing at an event, and sorry to put a plug in for our event in the Green Zone on Tuesday the 15th. I think it's in the room draw. We'll be discussing both green lines, green credit lines, green bonds, and blended finance. And so I think today the public sector needs to get its mind around on really that effectiveness and efficiency question in the use of public finance around this.
I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions, in any language. Okay.
Alors, je me présente, Amina Abdelrahman Sherif, de la société civile mauritanienne. Je suis mauritanienne, je suis de nationalité mauritanienne. Je voudrais remercier les panélistes d'abord pour cette excellente intervention. Et je voudrais aussi également remercier les organisateurs de ce stand qui nous a permis de connaître un peu plus sur la Banque islamique de développement et sur ses activités. Concernant le Sukuk, le Islamic Sukuk, je voudrais savoir dans quel cadre il n'est pas applicable. Et je voudrais aussi savoir si le Sukuk, je ne sais pas comment vous appelez, le Green Sukuk, est un projet de partenariat public-privé. Et je voudrais savoir aussi, dans le cadre de vos activités, est-ce que ce PPP, est-ce que cette initiative que vous lancez dans le cadre des projets verts, est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité pour les instituts de microfinance de participer à des candidatures s'il y a un appel d'offres? Je vous remercie.
Je vais commencer, comme ça va lancer la discussion. Il y a 3 questions dans votre question. La première, est-ce que les Sukuk, quelles sont les conditions à l'aune desquelles des Sukuk verts sont susceptibles d'être émis, et y a-t-il des cas dans lesquels ils ne sont pas applicables? La réponse est non. À partir du moment où vous avez des actifs tangibles. Alors, la finance islamique, c'est quoi, hein? C'est pas d'intérêt et essentiellement l'adossement de toute transaction financière à des actifs tangibles. Donc, à partir du moment où vous avez des actifs tangibles et que ces actifs sont éligibles au green, au label green, on peut les utiliser comme actifs sous-jacents à une émission de Sukuk vert. Après, il y a les conditions juridiques. Il y a un certain nombre de pays qui n'ont pas l'arsenal juridique capable de reconnaître une émission Sharia compliant, c'est-à-dire islamique. À partir du moment où le cadre juridique est ouvert et suffisamment accommodant, alors une émission de Sukuk est possible. Maintenant, en quelle devise? Alors l'idée, c'est bien évidemment de dynamiser le marché intérieur. Cela dit, des projets transfrontaliers doivent être émis en devises. Lesquelles? Les grandes devises internationales, essentiellement l'euro et le dollar. Votre deuxième question, est-ce que c'est forcément des PPP? La réponse est non. Des entités privées peuvent parfaitement émettre des green sukuk. Est-ce qu'un projet de PPP, donc une société de projet en partenariat public-privé, BOT ou autre, peut émettre des sukuk? Oui, ça s'est déjà fait. Est-ce qu'ils sont green? Non, pas encore. Et enfin, est-ce que la microfinance a un rôle à jouer? Pas directement sur le green, quoique, il faudrait creuser cette question. Mais est-ce qu'on peut penser, le schéma que je vous ai montré tout à l'heure, est-ce qu'il est applicable à des institutions de microfinance? Oui, on peut faire un fonds de microfinance islamique pour l'Afrique et le monde entier. D'ailleurs, ça existe déjà.
Just a follow-up to the answer provided. When we say Islamic sukuk, the word Islam is associated with the bond. Okay, yes, this is a follow-up answer to what my colleague rightly mentioned. When you use the word Islamic sukuk, I mean, the word sukuk is an Islamic bond. So anything we do within the bond, it has to be compliance with Sharia. So what does Sharia want us to do? Anything that is dangerous to humanity does not fall, sukuk will not be used to finance it. That's the bottom line. So if you have to draw a line between what is permissible under Sharia, under sukuk, and not permissible, is relative to what Sharia allows Muslim to do. Okay, to go down to microfinance, I think it would be a bit difficult to go directly to support microfinance because when you look at the size, it's a small one. But there could be line of financing provided by a development institution through which this can be channeled. So it's doable, but it requires some additional cost overhead to really achieve that. Thank you.
We can have one more question. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am Mohamed Tajdin El Ghabri. I'm a master's degree student here in the University of Qadi Iyad, Marrakesh. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for their outstanding presentations. And in fact, I have a deep question. It's technical about how do sukuks are structured. They are asset-based or they are asset-backed. In your, there is a bit different. And another question, what is the way are issued? It's ijara, it's murabaha. It may be the outcome of those sukuk for not ethical investors or who don't have faith. It can make concurrence with the other green bonds, conventional green bonds or the conventional bonds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is very much a university question. So, as we are both university teachers with Farid in the same university, we can answer both this question. But thank you, Farid. First question, the structure, asset-based or asset-backed? Both. There are two sorts, theoretically, there are two sorts of sukuk. Asset-backed sukuk using securitization techniques and asset-based with a third-party guarantee. In practice, 95% of sukuk issuances are asset-based with a third-party guarantee. Very few are asset-backed. What we're talking about here is a combination of both. It's asset-backed because they are an underlying asset which is providing the rental payments, but at the same time, if you have a AAA guarantee, it becomes an asset-based sukuk. So you don't really care about the assets, right? Second, is it always ijara? No. There are, IOFI says there are 14 ways to structure sukuk. In practice, the two underlying contracts used for sukuk that are the most used in the world are ijara and murabaha. Mudaraba and musharaka sukuk are more complex. Third, the investor base. Anybody can buy sukuk. That's the beauty of it. Come on, man. A conventional bond, only conventional investors can buy them. Sukuk, anybody can buy them. Conventional investors and Islamic investors. That makes the investor base broader. And at the end of the day, if you look at the numbers, one buyer of Sukuk out of two is not an Islamic institution. And that's good. It's not a matter of faith. It's a matter of it's a good product. Believe me, it's a good product.
Yeah, I think there's one point I'd like to add, because I think Anwar has make it very clear. I think the structure of the Sukuk will make it tradable or not. So usually for a Sukuk to be tradable, you need to have minimum, let's say 50% of Ijara assets. Ijara asset means lease, means that you have some rental coming from that. So that's why a lot of assets, actually, a lot of Sukuk are structured using Ijara. You can do Murabaha, but a Murabaha Sukuk will not be tradable. This means that you cannot trade it in the market. And that makes a lot of challenge for investors that would like to trade it. That's why when Anwar presents, I think, this project, and also us, ICD, where we say we're not ready yet to issue green Sukuk, because we need to have a solid assets, Ijara assets, existing Ijara asset. I think the main challenge is that if you go on the green finance, you can go and issue a bond and saying that the use of the proceeds will be to finance green projects. But on the Islamic side, it's very challenging saying that you're going to do Sukuk Musharaka, which is a future project, or using Istisna, which is project finance, because as long as the asset does not exist, this Sukuk is not tradable. So this is a technical question that I wanted to discuss with Anwar later, because I think he has been working on that. But technically, if you don't have assets, you cannot give the promise that you're going to use this money to build assets. The asset should be existing assets. So that's the main challenge. And that's why actually there is no green Sukuk yet.
Okay. Let's take two more questions. We have a question here and a question.
Please, the mic.
Mic, please. The mic. The mic, please. Yeah.
Hussein Boussaïd, Finiopolis. Je voudrais poser en fait trois petites questions à M. Anwar Hassoun, parce que je trouve en fait la structuration de financement proposée très intéressante. Juste en fait pas pour ma compréhension, dans ce que vous avez proposé en fait, vous parlez de deux véhicules. Vous parlez de la société de gestion et de l'autre société en fait qui est, je dirais, propriétaire des actifs. Pourquoi en fait les deux structures déjà? La deuxième question, vous parlez en fait d'une maturité des Sukuk. Vous avez parlé en fait de 10 ans. Est-ce que cela veut dire que les cash flows qui vont être dégagés seront en fait à même de rembourser? Pourquoi 10 ans exactement? La troisième question, puis si on parle en fait de ce genre de projet en Afrique, et là vous avez à juste titre parlé en fait de la tarification, et sachant que ce genre de projet est plutôt à rentabilité économique et sociale, est-ce que la subvention est une composante importante? Merci.
Thank you, merci. Alors, la société de gestion n'est pas un véhicule. Hein. La société de gestion gère l'assetco. Dans l'assetco, il n'y a rien. La société qui possède les panneaux, il y a juste deux personnes. Hein. Une personne qui s'occupe de la comptabilité et une personne qui s'occupe de l'administration. En fait, le vrai corps de gouvernance de l'assetco, c'est le conseil d'administration de l'assetco. D'accord? Et ce conseil d'administration va être nommé par la société de gestion. La société de gestion va gérer tous les flux comme dans n'importe quel fonds, qu'il soit monétaire, obligataire, action ou autre. D'accord? Donc l'assetco, c'est un véhicule with the sole purpose of owning the assets. D'accord? Donc la société de gestion, elle est hyper importante pour gérer la partie equity. et ensuite pour emprunter. Deuxième question, pourquoi 10 ans? Alors ça c'est un peu technique, quand vous regardez le marché des Sukuk dont Farid parle depuis tout à l'heure, marché des Sukuk, attention, hein, on a très peu de Sukuk long terme, très peu, 20 ans, 30 ans, 35 ans, on n'a pas. Le sweet spot, c'est entre 3 et 10 ans. À une époque, c'était 5-7. Aujourd'hui, on a des Sukuk 3 ans, on a un peu plus de Sukuk 7 ans et un peu plus de Sukuk 10 ans. Faire des Sukuk 20 ans, ça coince un petit peu. Donc, une idée possible, c'est de faire des émissions de Sukuk à la mi-vie du panneau. Un panneau, c'est à peu près 20 ans. Donc, vous le financez pendant la mi-vie et ensuite, vous refinancez derrière avec une autre émission de Sukuk ou par un bridge to Sukuk. Troisième question, est-ce que les subventions sont importantes? Carrément. Enfin, je veux dire, vous ne pouvez pas dégager 15% de return on equity sur la partie equity des Sukuk sans avoir de l'aide. Alors, la première aide, elle vient du prix de la garantie. Est-ce qu'on la charge à un tarif arm's length, comme on dit, un prix de marché? Non, si vous faites exploser le truc, il faut subventionner le prix de la garantie. Et la deuxième chose, oui, il faut aller chercher des garanties auprès de ceux qui nous donnent un petit peu de coup de pouce pour augmenter le PNL. Une fois que vous avez ça, alors effectivement, le truc marche. Sans les garanties, on ne va pas y arriver. Enfin, sans les subventions ni les garanties, on ne va pas y arriver.
We have one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation and your expertise. I'm Fatiha Floulos. I work as a product manager for participative banking. And my question is addressed to Mr. Farid and Dr. Hassoun. I completely understood that we need to have assets in order to issue green Sukuk, right? Since we're in Morocco and we're planning to engage in a deep green investment project, can we think about green sovereign green Sukuk? Would it be possible to you, or do you think are we still far from this ambition? Or, I mean, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think here there are two challenges in your question. The first challenge is the participative bank in Morocco and having Sukuk for them, which is a big discussion because participative banks are Islamic banks, and any banks, they need to manage the short-term liquidity. If you don't have commercial paper or any security to manage the short-term security, yeah, if you don't have any securities or any instrument to manage your short-term liquidity, it creates another challenges. So I think ICD also is working closely with the government to issue a Sukuk in local currency, which the main purpose will be to assist the new created participative bank to manage the short-term liquidity. But now, how we can mix this one with green? The issue is that the underlying assets. You know, what we said earlier is that we can have a commitment from the country saying that the use of the proceeds will be used for green assets. But the question will be the tradability of this kind of instrument. If it's a Sukuk, which means that this is a new project, it will be very difficult to find it tradable. And the banks, in order to manage the short-term liquidity, they need something very liquid. So I'd like to say that I don't see it in the near future, but I think as long as the participative bank will invest in a lot of infrastructure projects, I think, and if Mazen also, or if there is some asset that the government can put as a collateral, I think can be some good opportunity for Sukuk green, I think, issued by the government. I think we have seen, I think the Kingdom has bought 100 million of green bond issued by the World Bank. I think we have seen also Bank al-Barid, I think, issuing a green bond. So I think there is the investor community, and I feel very confident that in the near future, I think we can structure such instrument in
je peux répondre en français, comme ça sera plus rapide. Alors, la première chose, c'est effectivement l'urgence, c'est d'émettre des sukuk pas green pour les banques. Ensuite, il y a deux manières de le faire. Soit l'État émet des sukuk en utilisant le contrat de Ijara, et puis s'engage, mais c'est un engagement souverain dans le prospectus, à dire que les fonds qui vont être levés par cette émission de sukuk iront sur du green. Mais ça, c'est le green bond d'avant. C'est le green bond d'il y a quelques années. On peut le faire, c'est très bien, mais ça ne suffit pas. Il y a une autre manière de le faire, et en fait, il y en a deux autres. On parlait de la tradability, du caractère échangeable des émissions de sukuk. On peut penser à des private placements. On n'est pas obligé de faire que les sukuk sont tradable. On peut faire en sorte qu'ils soient placés auprès d'institutions qui vont le garder à maturité. L'autre manière de le faire, c'est de se dire, d'accord, ok, l'ONE a des projets green. Mazen ne fait quasiment que du green. Donc l'ONE et Mazen vont émettre des sukuk avec la garantie de l'État. Ça devient techniquement pour l'investisseur quoi? Un sukuk Mazen ou ONE ou un sukuk État? On prend un risque État marocain. D'accord? Alors si c'est techniquement possible d'un point de vue juridique, j'en sais rien, mais on peut y travailler, à la limite, pourquoi pas? On peut aussi, et ça c'est la troisième partie, mais c'est un peu plus compliqué, une plateforme d'émissions de sukuk où l'ONE et Mazen et l'État émettraient ensemble des émissions de sukuk conjointes. Ça existe, vous savez, la première fois que ça s'est fait entre le royaume du Danemark et celui de Suède pour un pont qu'ils ont construit entre les deux pays. Et à la fin, le rating de ce sukuk était supérieur à chacun des ratings des deux nations. Donc, puisque ça se fait au Danemark et en Suède, on peut penser que ça puisse se faire ailleurs. Mais bon, pas pour tout de suite, mais on peut y réfléchir. Ça peut faire l'objet d'un think tank assez intéressant qu'on pourrait mettre en place tous ensemble. Mais nous y pourvoirons avec Farid dans un avenir qu'on verra bientôt. Merci beaucoup pour tout et je pense qu'on va s'arrêter là.
Thank you. We have to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session. I'd like to thank our panelists, guest speakers, for the rich insights and talk this morning. We appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you all.